I'm going to create the ultimate 3D painting. Using the 3D parallax effect on these acrylic glass sheets, I'll be able to hand paint a super immersive painting and bring a unique and beautiful world to life. This video is sponsored by Honkai Star Rail. More about that later in the video. A few months ago, I followed a Bob Ross video on about 5 or 6 acrylic glass sheets which brought the whole painting to life. This time, with 8 hand-painted and a mix of acrylics and oil paints, I have a really cool plan. Parallax effect on this is gonna look insane. For those of you who don't know what the parallax effect is, let's say you have an object in the foreground like this beautifully drawn tree and something in the background like some clouds and some birds. The parallax effect is essentially where the further apart these objects are and the more layers of things in between them, the more 3D it ends up looking. Now I'm hoping that with 8 layers of acrylic hand-painted material here, we can create some really epic depth. And I have some plans that will make this look insanely cool. I want this to work as well as possible, which means I need a thorough plan. So rather than just painting on one acrylic sheet at a time, as you can see, I'm actually drawing out the entire plan of the scope of the image, at least the bare bones of it, on whiteboard marker on these acrylic sheets and just placing them one on top of the other, giving me a clear framework for every single layer moving forward that I can get rid of and keep my final painting. I want a big city skyline background with some flying vehicles and epic towers. As we get closer, there's a dividing line in the middle, windows of an interior that bring us to the inside of a futuristic building, full of sculptures and some greenery, leading all the way up to the foreground where we have our knight hero, with a separate layer for his flowing cape and hair, and layers in the foreground and background with those petals and some greenery to again accentuate that depth as much as possible. Let's get started with our skyline all the way at the back. Working with oil paints to lay down a gradient of a dark blue, almost purple at the top, down to a lighter blue at the bottom. Now you'll notice I had those wibbly wobbly lines throughout the sketch. That's because I wanted to create a bit of an aurora borealis feel that's going to accentuate the night sky and the stars, creating a really majestic feeling. I start to mix in whites and greens and blend that all together to create a really nice soft sky with a hint of that otherworldly light show. And the thing that's really going to make it pop is a blanket of stars throughout. Okay, there it is, our first layer, the very back, which I'm hoping will be a really cool foundation for everything coming forward. But as I make each layer, this is just gonna fade further and further into the background. Now, as you can see in my sketch, I have this horizon of building silhouettes and a few flying ships in the sky. But before jumping into the buildings, the first thing I do is actually create a bit of a misty fog, aggressively blending white clouds behind where those buildings are. Now, this is really hard to see through plexiglass onto white paper behind it. So I grab dark purple paper and move that around, and that gives me a clear way to sort of see how opaque or transparent my clouds are, because obviously they're going to show in front of my darker night sky painting. Then I can move on to the silhouettes of the buildings. Now I'm going to be working with oil paints through most of this project. There's something really satisfying about working with oils on acrylic. It just grabs the surface and it's really opaque, so it doesn't take a lot of paint to make sure you're not going to see through to the layers behind. After I painted in the silhouette of my ships and another layer of buildings, I go back to blending, which of course is the magic of the oil paint. I can just keep reworking this and softening it, almost as if it's blurry and in the background, which it is. This is quite far away from all the things that I want to be in focus much later in this project. So I'm working with subtleties here, keeping my horizon fairly unobtrusive and nice and soft. And in it goes. The tricky thing with oil paints is they stay wet for quite a while. Oh, it's just the beginning, but even just 2 layers of depth has me excited. All right, we have more city to do. So now on to, I guess this would be heading towards the midground of our piece overall. Continuing on with the city, just a few key environmental features and another opportunity to add depth. And this time I actually have some references. The universe of the sponsor, Honkai Star Rail, which has really cool environments. And as you'll see as the layers come together, there's a real mix of visual styles here. And that's starting to show in the city. We have an almost French style building on the left, and a large industrial building in the mid background, and then the rail that continues around the environment. And as I go, I'm continuing that blending of clouds in the foreground and slowly but surely introducing detail. Not a lot, because we're still quite far in the background, and these are going to be quite covered up by other stuff later, but I can start to introduce some highlights, some shadows, and a bit of pop here and there. In particular, on those two buildings, I want to bring out a little bit of a brick texture, emphasize some light from the windows, and soften everything together with a dry brush, all the while checking to make sure that just the right amount is opaque and transparent with that blue card behind my piece. With a few final details on the buildings, I finally have a complete city background to bring together. Oh! Yes! Nothing I like more than a world coming to life, and this world is the world of Honkai Star Rail, the sponsor of this video. Honkai Star Rail is a new free-to-play, cross-platform space fantasy RPG. It's an amazing game set in a science fantasy universe in which humanity and non-human sentient beings follow the path of deity-like beings known as Aeons. From the makers of Genshin Impact, the game is now available on PC, mobile devices, and PS5. As a trailblazer, you will explore different worlds across the universe and immerse yourself in an adventure filled with impeccable animation and music. Legit, the music is really dope. I've been listening to it non-stop while I've been painting. Soundtrack slaps, I have to say, honestly. With more than 20 playable characters, each with their own unique personality, backstory, and charm, in a rich, semi-open world experience, you can search for treasure chests, solve puzzles, and uncover the secrets of the world. Honkai Star Rail was just crowned as the best game overall on Google Play and on the iPhone game App Store. It's an insanely popular game with over 80 million downloads in its first 6 months. So it's a perfect time to start playing the game because you'll get loads of in-game rewards. And in the latest update, there will be new characters and stories, an all-new map released. The game looks amazing, sounds amazing, honestly, that soundtrack, and there's a whole universe out there for you to explore. So go check out Honkai Star Rail, use my link, and you can also use the redemption code down below for 50 stellar jades. Go check it out, and a huge thank you to Honkai Star Rail for sponsoring this video and inspiring this piece. You may recognize that Argenti character because he's the character in my sketch. And he's obsessed with beauty, so we got to do him proud. I gotta make this piece beautiful. I want this scene to be inside an interior, and so far we've painted an exterior that I want to be visible through cathedral-like windows. So this entire layer is simply a dividing layer between the interior that we'll be working on for the rest of this video and the exterior that we've just finished. This layer is a bit finicky because it's a lot less loosey-goosey than the previous layers, which were much more free-flowing and blended. These windows need to be sharp and neat. I need to be as consistent as possible with my perspective and opaque with my paint, but not slather it on so heavily that I can't control it. With the framing down, I work in shadows and highlights throughout that Renaissance style architecture. I really want to give the windows a feeling of reflectivity and something to clearly communicate that they're windows. I really lightly touch the bristles of a large brush onto white paint, wipe it off a bit, and just in a few brisk strokes, give the lightest possible hint of window reflections. I only have one go at that, so I really hope it works. Last but not least, I want to allude to panes of glass, so they don't just look like big single panels of glass. To do that, I put white paint on the edge of a stick and use that to sort of stamp that corner of the stick down in such a way that I can create subdivisions of window panels. All right, now I'm starting to get nervous. Cross your fingers. Ba-ba-da-ba. Look at that 3D effect. It's a little smudgy down here, but you know, I reckon we can cover it up with the next layers. Let's just chuck a big statue there or something. What is this space? I'm not sure. I feel like it could be a museum, it could be some sort of vault of ancient, beautiful treasures. Whatever it is, it's filled with ancient beauty, with these columns and vases, and one of the key elements of this space are the punches of red and the roses. Then we have this giant statue of a female in the background. Now we're starting to get a lot more detailed and nuanced with our oil painting, with some blending and some sharper areas to try and catch more contrasting highlights and shadows. And when I'm happy with the stonework, I start painting the cloth, a giant red velvet sheet draped over the arm and the shoulder of this statue. Painting this is really fun because those rich, gorgeous reds and crimsons and slowly working in the blending of the shadows and the highlights is just every bit as satisfying to paint as it is for you to watch. With a finishing touch of a few petals floating through the air, my statue in space is done. And here she is. Oh my gosh. Okay, what's this one look like? Pretty amazing. Oh my God. Every layer is just adding so much depth. It's just so satisfying. And the crazy part is this is all the background. I am painting Argenti from Honkai. And this is going to be really fun because we have this scene where there's just all these pops of flavor and color, but all of it is meant to act as a foundation to the character, to tell the story of who this character is. So let's get stuck into it, shall we? Now, first things first, I need to nail the details. So referencing the polished character art from the game, I make sure to get down all of the nitty-gritty details. I'm tracing this on the front side of my acrylic, and I've scaled him up a little bit because I want him to take up more of the space of my scene, to really stand out. And even though I've drawn this on the front of the acrylic, it shouldn't be a problem because as I paint onto the acrylic, the line work will disappear and the paints will take over. And now that I'm ready to paint, I'm switching things up a bit. I am not painting with oil paints anymore. I am switching to acrylics for a few reasons. One, it's going to create a bit more of a matte sheen, making a really clear outcome. And two, it will allow me to work in layers and get more defined. The oil paints are gorgeous for blending, but I want a really crisp aesthetic with really decisive color and light and shadow placement. Funnily enough, it's actually trickier to work with than the oil paints on the acrylic. It's basically like painting with acrylic paints directly on plastic, which, as you might know, doesn't adhere amazingly well, and it's a bit slippery and tends to sort of blend in with the ink that I drew on, muddying up what I'm putting down. But after putting down one layer of the acrylics, it lays down a perfect foundation for me to get a really clean layer on top, allowing me to go through and add the details and the highlights and bring my whole piece together. But my painting of Argenti is made up of two layers. Obviously 90% of him is on that front layer, but I'm doing another layer that will go directly behind him, which will be his flowing hair and a piece of fabric flailing out from his outfit. All right, one at a time now. First, we have the rearmost layer of the character, the flowing hair, fabric, and a few falling petals. Then the main event. And there you have it. Oh my gosh, it's so perfect. And it's really subtle too, like that's what I wanted. I only wanted a little bit of depth just to show that it's behind and moving. This is really, really shaping up to be one of the best pieces I've ever painted, let alone in 3D. But I'm not done yet because I need to do something for the foreground. And as you can see, I've sketched this out already and prepared it, and I'm going back to oil paints, working with the original palette that I had and working to oil paint strengths, mixing in a variety of interesting and earthy colors and creating a really organic and haphazard blend. I'm painting this darker so that the attention goes to the lighter areas in the midground and without much detail because it needs to feel a little out of focus, again, so our attention goes to the character. Last but not least, let's work in those feature roses and petals, which will tie everything together and create a theme that runs through all of these panels. This is it, the very last piece. It is done. Epic reveals. This has been one of the most ambitious paintings I've ever done. And it's not just a painting, it's paintings. Like every layer was hard work. But the fact that it comes together and works so well as this window into another universe is just so satisfying. I hope you've had as much fun coming along this adventure with me as I have had trying to make this happen, and I couldn't be prouder of the results. If you liked this, make sure to hit the like button and consider subscribing for more fun with ambitious art and creativity. Can't help but wonder how we can make it bigger with even more depth and ambition. No, I need to stop. This is taking me days and I'm going insane. Thank you so much for watching, and until next time, I'll see you later.